System of justice. At the time, it was still, technically speaking, the King's Law. That law was made with Council and with Parliament. It was administered mainly on a local level. There were 2 or 3 justices of peace in each county. They were given King's Commissions. They were basically upstanding members of the community in exactly the same way that we'd appoint a magistrate nowadays. Alongside that, each of the magnates in the area would have oversight of the more serious issues. They may not necessarily oversee that themselves. They might delegate it to someone within their household. Those JPs and magnates had the right from the King and from the Council to administer law on pretty much any level. They could deal with anything from petty theft through to minor revolts in their jurisdiction. They had the power to administer pretty much any kind of punishment, including the death sentence. The only things that got bumped upwards to the monarch or the council were the ones that involved the nobility themselves. If it was a major noble who was being accused of something, in theory, not always in practice, they had to be tried by the council. That was so that they were being judged by their peers. They weren't being judged by people that were beneath them who may hold grudges against their overlords. The king, theoretically then, is only involved in the most serious of cases. Those cases being cases of treason against him in person. This leads to the question of why was the king involved in going to Kent to administer justice after Cade's revolt? And the key to it, if you look at the sources in the previous exercise, is that it says that there are threats against the king's person. Now, that's a perceived threat in many ways, but a threat against the king's person at the time was treason. They've also caused lots and lots of problems, and it's not just the problem of them marching on London. It's a response also to the death of William de la Pole, his murder. He was the Duke of Suffolk, which had happened just a couple of months before. He was Henry VI's favourite, so it's a personal response there. So justice in this case is on a grand scale. They're going to try and crush it. So when you see that there is the King, Duke of Somerset, Duke of Exeter, Earl of Shrewsbury, many other lords, many justices, they're going there en masse, and over a period of 4 days, they're sitting down and they're bringing everyone that had a big role in that revolt in front of them, and they are trying them and sentencing them. Now, we think of trials nowadays as lasting, 2, 3, 4, whatever period of time. You get a defence, you get a prosecution, you get deliberation, you get plenty of evidence. Typically, trials, therefore, non-nobles would be minutes. If you look at the rolls, the 2 or 3 lines long. What they're after are the ringleaders, the people that spread seditious sort of comment, who spread the manifesto, who rabble-roused. And they're the ones who become the harvest of heads. They're the ones that get dragged in front of the king and the senior advisors to him. And in executing them is setting a really big example. I mean, that's an unprecedented amount of beheadings on any level for any monarch to happen on such a short period of time. I mean, 4 days and there's 21 sort of big beheadings, and that it reverberates throughout Kent. It's it's bound to, because those men come from all across the county. It's sending out a very clear message. If you mess, there will be serious repercussions, and they will send men in to enforce things, and conditions there will get harsher and harder. It's incredibly unusual for someone who wasn't a noble to be beheaded. That particular form of execution was reserved for the nobility because it was then the fastest way of dispatching the person who was being executed. Typically, someone lower down the line would be hung. These men were made an example of. They were some were hung, drawn quarters. Others plain beheaded. But the heads were then taken from Kent to London and quite symbolically put onto London Bridge, which of course is where they'd fought to get into London. So it's sending a massive symbol there to anyone heading towards London. This is what happens to traitors.